Hi, good morning, everybody. Can we all please settle down? If you could take your seats. Thank you, all you people at the back. Could you please come and please settle down? Thank you. Virat, over to you, please.
Honorable Minister Sri Rajeev Chandrashekhar ji, ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, good afternoon and welcome to this very special session. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the Honorable Minister for State for Electronics, IT and Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. PAFI has had the privilege of hosting the Honorable Minister and hearing his views in the past, as you're aware. So thank you for taking the time. I know that you're fresh out of a hard-fought election campaign that just finished some 48 hours ago, and sort of you decided to and agreed to be here, for which we are deeply grateful for you. As a member of the Union Council of Ministers of the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Narendra Modi's government in India, as you are aware, Mr. Chandrashekhar holds twin responsibilities as the Minister of State for Electronics, Information Technology and Skill Development and Entrepreneurship in the country. He's focused on implementing the Honorable Prime Minister's vision of Digital India by expanding and deepening India's tech and innovation economy and developing India as a global talent and entrepreneurship hub. In this regard, he's leading several initiatives such as the Semiconductor Mission for India, electronic system design, manufacturing, deep tech, investment promotion, startup and technology policy development. A tech native, as he's often called, Mr. Chandrashekhar has a bachelor's in electrical engineers from MS from computers from Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago. He started his engineering career, for those of you who don't know, in the United States, working on microprocessors, compilers, and Unix operating system at Intel. In the early 90s, he returned to India to begin his entrepreneurial journey, setting up one of India's earliest and largest mobile networks, BPL Mobile, which he successfully exited to Hutchison, now called Vodafone, in 2005. In 2006, he committed himself completely to a long-term public service, a 3-term parliamentarian. He started his political career as a member of parliament in 2006, campaigning for various public interest and economic growth issues, including exposing the 2G spectrum allocation scam in the telecom sector as an opposition MP, advocating for rules-based open internet data privacy and interoperability, something that you see till date in his work. Since 2014, prior to becoming a minister, he was a member of many important parliamentary committees, including finance and technology, amongst others. Currently, the Honorable Minister is executing the Indian government's mission for building a $1 trillion tech economy in India by 2025-26, and also working towards making India a global skills hub. Honorable Minister, you already know PAFI. You've been here several times, but just sort of to short plug, PAFI is today about 100 professional companies, Indian and foreign, as members of the association across several sectors. Some of India's senior-most policy professionals who advise investment and expansion issues to their CEOs and boards are members of PAFI. We are at the forefront of driving ethical, transparent, and evidence-based interactions amongst the government, industry, media, academia, and other stakeholders in the economy. I personally like to refer to PAFI as a spiritual home for policy professionals. And on behalf of PAFI, I'd like to thank the Honorable Minister, like I said, to be here. He landed only at 9:41, I'm told, and to be here is sort of, we remain deeply obliged for that. The topic of today's keynote and our interaction is Prime Minister's vision for India's tech decade. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in an election year, so I think this topic becomes even more significant because we've got about 9 months to 10 months to go for the general elections. So we want to talk about what can be done in this short period of time, what is continuing from the back, what is the hope for the industry, for the citizens, on the range of issues from digitalization to the multiplicity of laws, to focus on what the government has had on semiconductors, on the electronics manufacturing and exports. So without any further ado, may I request the Honorable Minister to deliver his keynote. Please welcome him with a warm applause.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Virat, for that warm introduction. It's good to be back. I think it's the second time that you've had me over, and I hope I can be a little bit more interesting this time around than I was last time. I'll certainly make an effort to get your attention. So first of all, today is National Technology Day. I don't know if it's a coincidence that you happen to arrange it today, or yeah, so we'll pretend it was all very well planned. So obviously, public affairs professionals here, so everything is well planned. The topic that I've been asked to speak to you about and share my thoughts on was PM's vision for the India Decade. The India Decade, as you know, is the phrase that our Honorable Prime Minister has given to the next decade, and he coined that phrase to, in a sense, communicate that this decade, this forthcoming decade, this coming decade is a decade full of technology opportunities, and that's how he sees it. That's how our government sees it. And therefore, all of government is aligned to make this India Decade a reality. What does the India Decade mean? And I think that is one of the questions that I'm asked when I visit colleges, universities, and I've had the privilege and honor of meeting, going around and traveling to 52, 53 colleges around the country over the last year and a half. And the way that I explain the India Decade is take everybody back to 2015 when the Honorable Prime Minister launched Digital India. And he launched Digital India, and he laid out, of course, it was a long program, and there were many people speaking, and therefore there was plenty of other conversation around that day. But he essentially laid down three pillars or three markers as his vision, as what he sought from Digital India. The first one was, he said his focus was that technology empowers and transforms people's lives, and that technology transforms the narrative of governance and democracy that India had been stuck with for several decades. The second pillar, outcome, marker, was that he wanted technology to be a driver of economic expansion, the digital economy expansion, opportunities, entrepreneurship expansion. And the third was, in obviously very prescient sort of a way, he saw that the future is going to be dominated by and driven by technology and innovation so much. The role of India and Indians in that future technology-dominated world ought not to be just spectators and consumers, but ought to be architects, designers, producers of solutions, devices, products, platforms, rather than just being a consumer of tech as India had been for 30 years, preceding that 2015. So in a lot of ways, these three goals, outcomes of Digital India are what are also driving the India Decade. So in a manner of speaking, the last 9 years, we've seen a lot of transformation, a lot of goals, a lot of outcomes, a lot of milestones being reached in these three areas. But what the government's goal today is that the next decade, it will be pedaled to the floor, and we are going to intensify, grow, accelerate all of the three areas that I spoke about in terms of what we want to do there. So that is at a very macro level. At a very micro level, or at least a slightly more granular level, what the India Decade means is the narrative about India being an ITES hub, which was the narrative in 2014, and has slowly broadened to include the internet, consumer tech, and all of those areas in the last 5 years. That opportunity, the spectrum of areas that Indian entrepreneurship and Indian investments and Indian platforms and Indian companies and foreign companies will now will create an ecosystem or a digital economy spectrum that will range from ITES on one end of it, the internet and consumer tech in the middle, but also will include AI, electronics manufacturing, electronic system design, semiconductor manufacturing, semiconductor design, quantum, and the entire spectrum of what the world sees as opportunities to describe the forthcoming decade. So I just wanted to leave that thought with you, that we are moving away from being a niche player or a player in one slice of the digital economy pie to being a participant, and a strong participant in the entire pie that represents the digital economy today and tomorrow. So having sort of shared with you what the goals are, what the policy objectives will be, what are the issues that we are focusing on today? So if you look at one broad, basic underlying theme of talent, that in a sense is almost the condition precedent to all of these areas of creating from our college and education system talent that will be useful for, can catalyze and drive the innovation in these 4, 5, 6 areas that I talked about. That is certainly a priority, and we're very focused on that. And to give you an example, in the semiconductor space, just in a span of 14 months, after the Prime Minister gave us this $10 billion to invest, we have not just created opportunities in manufacturing, but also in design and innovation. And we have backstopped that with an entire brand new curriculum that is being implemented in the higher education system and the skilling system today, that will deliver 85,000 highly qualified postdoctoral, doctoral, masters, undergraduate, and other certified professionals and talent that will be, in a sense, the talent pool for not just the Indian semicon ecosystem, not just the Indian electronics ecosystem, but also the global semicon and global electronics ecosystem. So that is talent. The second big move focus you've seen over the last 4 years has been the focus on manufacturing. And to moving India from being this very, very fringe outlier player in the global value chains on electronics and all of the associated ecosystem to being a serious player, a significant part of that redrawn, redesigned ecosystem. And I'm glad, and I'm sure you've heard today, Cisco has announced now manufacturing in India. So with Apple and Cisco and Samsung and all these global brands and global dominant players in the GVCs of electronics making a move to India, not by abandoning what they already have, but in a certain sense diversifying it. That second very big cog in the overall tech wheel is again growing. So that is something that we're very focused on. We believe that the supply chains, the global value chains, have to and will continue to grow and diversify, and that India will be, and our policies will be focused on ensuring that India is a competitive, efficient partner in that GVC. Third part of what we are doing for policy professionals is that digitalization of government, digitalization of public services is accelerating even further. You know that over the last 5, 7 years, we've done a tremendous job, the government has done a tremendous job with the India stack, with Aadhaar as an identity authentication platform, UPI as a financial transaction gateway, and the many, many layers that have now been layered on the India stack. We have created a very, very efficient, very, I mean, I'm using this phrase to pat ourselves on the back, but it's certainly true, awe-inspiring transformation of the process of government, and in a sense, the relationship, the G2C relationship that has really created more and more trust in government, more and more transparency. That process is now getting even further accelerated. And you will see in the coming, I think 3 or 4 weeks, you will see the government taking a decision on Digital India 2.0 and digital government for the India decade. That itself will have a tremendous impact on the ecosystem of innovation around it. And I always share this example. to people who are somewhat cynical about the impact of government's digitalization on the innovation economy, I point them to UPI. UPI was designed to solve a government problem of how to target and vector subsidies directly to the citizens. That problem got solved by the UPI with DBT and Jan Dhan Yojana, and has in turn spawned one of the fastest growing and most exciting fintech ecosystems in the world. So there is a direct correlation, or at least there is a correlation between the government's digitalization process and digitalization and the innovation economy around it. Just to further strengthen that point, the India stack is so attractive to so many countries that we are in June organizing a global India Stack conference where we expect over 20 plus countries to be participating who want to implement the India Stack part or whole in their own digital models and digital government models. Let me quickly touch on electronics. I broadly spoke about electronics, but the vision in electronics is not, and some people ask this, are you only going to assemble Samsung phones? Are you going to assemble Apple phones? And is that your goal? And the answer is clearly no. The statement that describes our electronics mission or vision is a statement that says broadening and deepening the electronics ecosystem. And the broadening means that, of course, the mobile phone category, which is a very, very fast growing, very successful category, will continue to grow it. But we want to broaden the categories to include compute, automotive, telecom. So these 4 or 5 broad categories that dominate the electronic space, we will continue to broaden the categories with PLI and other policy support. And as the scales of these categories reach a certain critical mass, we also want to start deepening and creating a very viable, robust, global scale component ecosystem. So when we look at electronics, there is a very clearly cut strategy at work that the Honorable Prime Minister and the government are implementing, and it is almost a decadal strategy. What China took 30 years to achieve, this government and our country wants to implement in 1 decade. So if you want to ask me, when did that decade start, which is a legitimate question, I would say that the decade started in 2019, and that by 10 years from 2019, that is 2029, with an in-between milestone of 2025, we will be at $500 billion of electronics manufacture with a $300 billion target by 2026, 25-26. So this is kind of what we are doing in these areas of expanding the digital economy, expanding the opportunities, expanding all of this to be global players, a global player and a global, having Indian companies and India-based companies serving the global consumer, the global enterprise, and global value chains. So what is the impact of all this? Why are we doing this? Is it just because there's a post-COVID fad, things are changing? Certainly not. Our Prime Minister's vision, the government's vision is very clear. We want to be the top 3 economies by 26, 27. We are certainly within striking distance of Japan and Germany. Recently there was a cartoon by Der Spiegel. I don't know if how many of you caught it. There's a cartoon that had an Indian train and a Chinese train. And the Der Spiegel cartoonist thought he was being very funny when he said, this is India and this is China, and India will never catch up. And I tweeted saying, watch out, because in a couple of years, India is going to be crossing Germany in terms of GDP. So I don't think you should smile that much, and or at least reserve it for when we cross your GDP. So look, I think we are very confident that we are within striking distance of number 4 and 3, and that we can be the number 3 economy in the world very quickly, very soon. And a large part of that growth and expansion is going to come from the digital piece. in 2014, the digital economy as a percentage of the GDP was about 4 to 6%. And we expect by 2025-26 for the digital economy to be about 20% of GDP. 20% of a GDP that is growing. It's a 20%, not a static GDP. So you can imagine that the digital economy will have to grow at about 25%, 30% plus in the next 4 to 5 years. Which is why whenever Apple or Samsung or now Cisco invite me to talk at a meeting, I show up very quickly without any complaint, because a large part of that heavy lifting, these brands and these companies will have to do. So certainly this is about growing the economy, creating jobs, creating investments. There's an underlying reality to it that as a politician, we have absolute clarity on that what we do is not just about meetings such as this. It is when we hit the election road, we have to talk about the real stuff about creating jobs, creating investment, creating economic activity, creating opportunities for our youngsters all around the country. So the digital economy piece is a big part of that politically, is a big part of what we want our economy to be by 27 as the number 3 economy in the world. And it's a big part of creating and catalyzing even further the entrepreneurship culture that has been sort of lit in the last 5-6 years, with more and more startups contributing to this economic growth and economic activity of this country. What do I seek from this assembled group of people, and what do I seek from public affairs professionals in general or in particular? We are embarking, as I said, on a journey in this India Techade to be a global player in tech, in all things tech, whether it's AI, quantum computing, semiconductors. We are at the round table now. We are on the table, the head table, and we have a view, we have a vision, we have the energy, we have the determination to succeed. And of course, there will be policies made and there will be goals set by the government. But as we make these policies, and our Prime Minister is very clear on this, we want these policies, these laws, these legislations to be global standard. We want them to be catalysts to our ambitions to grow. And where public affairs and people such as yourselves who are professionals can help is to participate in the consultation processes that are now becoming institutionalized in how we make policy. And participate and show up not just to have a government chai and a government pakoda, but with really thoughts, ideas, solutions, suggestions that can make these process of engagement between the government and professionals such as yourself and the enterprises and the organizations that you represent a really meaningful force multiplier type of engagement. Everything we are doing today in the tech space, every step we take, every policy we take it with deep, active consultation and engagement with every stakeholder. The consumers, the big tech good guys, the big tech bad guys, the startups, the governments, the academicians, everybody. And so we have seen over the process of the last several months that consultation is throwing up really good frameworks for the laws and the rules and the legislation that we are formulating. So I would urge you that we leave behind the concept of lobbying, which was really a much more, let's say, less satisfying outcome, and there are sometimes outcomes that are very focused on one entity or one enterprise, and start engaging in a way that when we are talking about the Digital India Act, the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, all of these pieces of important legislation, the PLIs for the next round of categories, product categories, that we engage in a way that is really open, transparent, but also high quality, and helping us design this India Techade framework and the laws and rules that will catalyze India Techade rather than just serve some narrow purpose in the short term. I will stop here, and I can certainly tell you that as somebody who's invested over 30, 35 years in tech, and I say 30 to 35 because I want to leave some ambiguity on how old I am or how experienced I am, that I've never been more excited about where we are going as a nation, where we are going together as industry and government, where we are going as startups and entrepreneurs. This is an absolutely unprecedented and exciting time for all of us. But if you can figure out a way of making this partnership really more fruitful, really much more high quality, then we can signal and show the world that India Techade is really about a determined nation on the move and a determined tech ecosystem on the move. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say two things. One, my compliments, sir, for coming out of a 2-week election campaign, being completely focused on an issue that is of deep interest to policy professionals. I'm not sure any one of us can do that, to run a campaign for 2 weeks in the streets and cities of Karnataka, and then be here on the morning to do what you just did. So thank you so much for that. Second, I just wanted to let the delegates know that what the minister just spoke about is actually structured comments based on what we had requested him to do to address. These were not just generic comments, so it kind of that sense of rigor and the ability to address issues that have been posed to him, and we are deeply appreciative of that. We don't see that. We used to never see that earlier. We still don't see it a lot, but I think it's improving a lot, and thank you for setting the standard so high. So you talked about pedal to the floor and how the government is kind of focused deeply on $1 trillion digital economy, which is not easy by any stretch of imagination, especially from where we are in the 75 years of where we have reached, and notwithstanding the incredible achievements over the last few years. So one of the things that you are driving is the various laws that concern almost everybody in this room. In some of the consultations that you have said, the tech lawyers and the tech companies come in, but not everybody comes in. This is a more generic group, as I said, 100 companies. Many of them are not in tech or use tech in some way, but those laws will impact everybody. If I could request you to just speak a little on the laws that you are focused on and how broadly it might impact non-tech companies as well, and also some timeline, because it's, we read a lot about this, on when some of these might see the light of day and the implementation that will really help a broader set of people, and in fact the media as well, to understand where we are. Thank you.
Yeah, so Virat, I certainly don't think there is any such thing as a non-tech company, because I think in the world that we live in, it is just the degree of tech intensity that varies between company and company. So right. I think we should certainly put that to the side, that that there is such a thing as non-tech company. And point number one, the world that we are living in poses tremendous number of challenges in terms of how to pivot, how to grow, all of that. It represents many opportunities in terms of how technology helps you do many things that you could not do before, reach places and people that you could not do before, do products and services that you could not do before. But also has caused, certainly, and I think most people will know here, that is also causing more and more user harm. Yeah, I'll use that phrase up front. And therefore, our approach is really not necessarily to create laws and regulations that will in any way stifle innovation or create any hurdles or road bumps to companies that are doing their thing. We certainly don't want to come anywhere or anyway in that process. but we certainly believe it's an obligation that we have to address these issues of harm and the rights of the digital Nagriks, the Indians who are, in a sense, engaging with digital companies to protect their rights. So using that as a narrow prism or as a periscope, we are looking at the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which is really to do with privacy and protection of personal data. Very clear, very simply written, very simply architected and designed. And that bill has gone through several consultations. It is going to be very shortly introduced. It will certainly make it very clear that we have managed to balance what seems to be three contradictory objectives of protecting the citizen, allowing innovation and companies to continue to do their thing, and as well as allow government in emergent situations to access data and information that are required by the government. So we have done all these three in a manner that is absolutely fair, transparent, and very durable and evolvable. So I think the other element of our design is, apart from user harm, we are not building laws and legislations that are hard-coded for today. We are allowing these laws and regulations to evolve as the world of tech will evolve, and I think we are all safely here can assume that what we see today is not the world we'll see tomorrow, and what we see tomorrow will not be the world we see day after tomorrow. So those are the two things as far as the DPDP is concerned. The other big thing that we are doing today, big as in fundamental, not big as in thick document, is the Digital India Act. And that is going to supersede the IT Act, because the IT Act is about 23 years old. It was enacted in 2000 when the internet was not even on the horizon or on anybody's radar. And certainly the Act does not even have the word internet in it. So I think there is a new bill, new act, which will be called the Digital India Act, which has gone into pre-consultation mode, where even on the design we are consulting with the stakeholders, and we've had one or two very, very successful pre-consultation rounds with groups of people who are very aggressive, eager lawyers to stakeholders to, and I think we have signaled that we want to do the future of the IT Act, the DIA, absolutely as a partnership. And that now will see a draft by probably the end of the month. That will go into consultations all of June, and we will have, depending on how the consultations go, we will have a draft act very quickly.
On the data protection bills that you spoke about, is that expected to?
Yeah, I think I see no reason why it should not come in the next session of Parliament. I see no reason, of course.
Thank you so much. If I can turn to the delegates, I know there was a question, so please go ahead.
Very good afternoon, and Mr. Minister, pleasure to have you here. And I speak to you in the context of electronics manufacturing. Huge compliments to you and your team for bringing back electronics manufacturing into the country, and very impressed with your 500 billion vision for the year 2030. And I come from the auto manufacturing industry, the component industry. And electronics is going to be a very significant part of our industry. We just did a report, and by 2030, when you're saying that the ecosystem in India would be around $500 billion, we would be exactly 20 to 25% of that, from $10 billion today. Yeah. And I just don't want you to react, but it's just that I wanted to make a comment here, is that, we go to the Ministry of Heavy Industry, which is our parent ministry, and they say this is the subject of MITI. I go to MITI, they say this is the subject of the auto industry. I just don't want this huge opportunity to fall through. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention, and I'm sure we will meet and we'll make a detailed presentation to you and sensitize you on this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I won't react to it because you've asked me not to react to it. So I won't certainly react to it, but I'll certainly make a comment. Look, this is not unusual, because I think the fact that technology is now migrating and embedding in so many other areas will require cross-ministerial types of policy making, and we are aware of that. And we are absolutely at MeitY. We don't have very much of an ego about leading it or not leading it. We are certainly involved in the process, interministerial process, where PLIs are made in the other ministries, where we suggest and give our views on it. But this is, I wouldn't think of this as some nuclear science, some discovery of a new boson or a proton or whatever. This is an understood consequence of what is happening, which is the increasing digitization and technology intensity increasing in categories which nobody would have thought of. And who would have thought 5 years ago that we would talk about a car as essentially a data center on wheels? That is the characterization of a vehicle today, or an automobile sector today. So, yes, yeah, no reaction.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to come to you in the order that I see the hand, so I have a limitation. Go ahead, sir. And please go ahead. Identify yourself.
Where are you now?
I'm with Unilever, sir.
I see. That's a big jump from CNBC to Unilever.
Yes. You talked about laws of today not being hard-coded, right? So I just wanted to understand, do we then see a mechanism or a modality through which the legislation specifies the overall purpose, but the laws get implemented to the rules? Because a lot of these specifics, if it's easier for us to...
I'll explain this. I think the laws will certainly, the legislation will contain the principles of what it is that the law intends to achieve. And there will be no ambiguity about that. Certain aspects of how you implement those principles will continue to evolve. And so those will be subordinate legislations. And to those people who think subordinate legislation somehow mean bypassing the parliament, I respectfully point out to them that all subordinate legislations have to be placed in front of parliament. So there is there's nothing in the process that in any way bypasses the legislative oversight or legislative participation. But the law will move from being hard-coded, prescriptive for the day, to being principle-led, so that there is no ambiguity, regardless of whatever technology throws at you, that the principles of user harm, the principle of openness, the principles of safety, the principles of accountability are pretty seriously hard-coded in the law. So you will have that. But how do you then have that implemented? What are the basic do's and don'ts of that? That will continue to evolve. Now, for example, user harm in AI today, if somebody comes up with a law today and says, I'm going to hard code everything about user harm in AI today, he needs to get his or her head examined. But because you cannot, you don't even know what the challenges are. So we will say that, look, user harm, we need guardrails for AI. This is how we see it for the current and tomorrow. This is what is the user harm that we want the law to address. And as those things throw up more and more challenges, those will be added.
I saw another hand go up in the back. Yes, lady, and then I'll come to the front row. Yes. Can you get the mic to her? Thanks.
Hi, thank you so much for such an insightful
identify
session.
Yourself, please, and
Yeah,
then
I'm Urvashi from Indian School of Public Policy. So you've seen how passionate our scholars are, right? I am curious to understand, how does government envision the role of these young professionals in shaping and implementing the India's tech agenda, and how does it plan to equip them for right skills?
So I want to say this again, and I said this I think during my talk. It is something that is an article of not just faith, but we believe in it, the Prime Minister downward, that the laws that we are creating are laws for the next decade. The framework that we are creating of policies is for the next decade. It must live and create momentum for the next decade. So that is why I said, we certainly understand that within government we have this kind of view, this kind of capacity, this kind of capability, and to add on to it, we use this, let us say, institutionalized tool of consultations, public consultation. And there we allow anybody to participate. You are either a consumer, you are a company, you're an entrepreneur, you're a startup, you're a public policy expert, you're a public policy student. For example, every rule I have come to the Indian public policy students and scholars, and I have patiently sat down and taken them through what is our intent and taken on every question and clarification that they have. And I can tell you, I am not doing anybody a favor. The government is not doing anybody a favor, because between what we started off, for example, in gaming, online gaming, how we started and how we ended was directly a consequence of the public consultations we held. So public consultations are a win-win, but the only request I have is that the consultees and the consulters, if there is a phrase like that, both need to be in the room to add value and make it 1 + 1 = 2, know that the whole is more than the sum of parts, that we do a better job after meeting rather than without meeting. You understand?
I understand. I also understand your famous line about don't give us a speech, tell us what you want us to do.
Yeah, that's the other thing. We have gone through this learning process where the initial consultations, people would come and start making speeches, or sorry to use this phrase, or whining about some problem. So I would say, look, that's fine. I'll give you another meeting. You to come and complain about your problem, but in this meeting, give me something that I can work with. So I think consultations are the way forward. This government totally believes in it, and we are walking the talk.
Yes, please go ahead, ma'am. I'll come to you next.
I'm Nirupama Soundararajan, CEO of Pehle India Foundation, and I'm glad you brought up online gaming, because specifically my question is, with the recent amendments, I'm wondering if you are contemplating setting up a gaming commission as well. Largely because while the SROs and very well thought to structures are effective, but they don't usually have the right to impose penalties, fines, and would a gaming commission, which is in line with international practices, be a better way to go as an in-between layer of the ministry and the SROs?
So
thank you.
Look, so here, this is one of the quandaries that we have. Our government believes in ease of doing business, and we want to make it easier and easier for somebody with an idea to make that idea a reality. So we are, in a sense, not opposed. We don't want to create an additional layer. And then when you do a commission or a regulator, it will be usually retired bureaucrats, or all those kind of things happen. And I have been a telecom entrepreneur, and I certainly know how a regulator can either destroy a young person's dream, or or destroy it even further. So there are only two options there. So we as a government would not want to do anything to make things more complicated. But of course, if there's a gap, let us say, in the oversight that shows up after we create the SROs, we will figure out a way of how to plug the gap. We are, with online gaming, we are taking a very bold experiment, which is saying that we trust the industry and trust the stakeholders, not just industry, trust the stakeholders to regulate the industry. And that stakeholder is not just the industry. So it is not about saying, like in the media case of media, do self-regulation. We are saying it is not the government regulating, but it is a credible organization with credibility that will be prescribed to you on what trust and what principles you have to follow. But this is not necessarily the government. So there may be a government representative, but it will be gamers representatives, it will be teachers, it will be gaming companies, it will be all of that, lawyers. So it's an experiment. Let's see how it works out. I certainly don't want to pretend, or I don't want to confirm that having a monolithic body of people on top is the only way we should explore these type of new innovative industries.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say this about the Honorable Minister. He's talked about less regulation, but I have seen no one fight harder with greater passion to defend the rights of a regulator. Back in 1997 and 98, as a young entrepreneur, he went to court, he fought with the powers that be, unimaginable levels, just to protect the dignity and the role of TRAI, which was fledgling in a new regulator back then. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen him defend them and fight for them, because independent, he believes in the power of independent regulation.
Yeah, and let me also say that, you know, there is a tendency to just say regulator as if this is something you shop from a grocery store. Regulators are institutions that you have to very painfully build. There is capability, there is capacity, there is integrity, there is an appreciation for transparency, multi-stakeholder involvement, which is very, very different from bureaucracy. You know, bureaucracy is evolving in the last 5-7 years to that kind of a bureaucracy, but essentially a regulatory instinct is very different from a bureaucratic instinct. And that is not something you can just say, okay, let's have a commission, let's just do it. It is something to evolve. So let's see.
Go ahead. Can you get a mic here, please?
Thank you so much. My name is Subhi Chaturvedi and I represent InMobi, which is also India's first unicorn. Sir, when you were speaking, I was mentally ticking it off as a public policy scholar and student. You've covered this also, you've covered this also. And it comes from the sense of being an entrepreneur and someone who gets technology first. So therefore our asks from you are always that much more because you keep raising the bar higher each time we come to you. I was thinking from telecom, when you translate that into IT, with TRAI it is very clear. You rule on tariffs, you make sure consumers are protected, and then you look at orderly growth of the industry. With you coming on board and looking at the IT Act, we've seen a lot of PLI and incentivization for hardcore manufacturing as well as design in electric vehicles. Now with India for the first time creating technology and also OSs, we are challenging Googles and Facebooks of the world. How do you see regulatory sandboxes and Digital India Act? Because we're very, very optimistic and there's a lot of hope attached to it. Even someone like an InMobi creating a new OS for that matter. Nobody was looking at these problems even 10 years ago. So with that hope, does your task get more complex? Because there's also balancing the push that comes from international technology saying there's reciprocity. And then there's the India aspiration. Thank you.
No, so look, I want to be very clear that the government does not have some crystal ball that says that this will happen and that will happen. That's not our job at all. What we are saying is that we want to create a framework that is absolutely transparent, that is very easy to comply with, and that framework will encourage innovation where it comes from. We don't care. If Google is doing the next innovation, great for them. We will certainly want them to do it in India, and we will create incentives for them to do it in India. We will not create any exclusion. There's no blacklist. We will certainly encourage every company to come to India, because I firmly believe, as somebody being in tech for so many years, that the talent that will shape the future of the tech world, I'm not saying it is not there anywhere else in the world, but I can certainly say with some confidence that a large part of that talent is in India. So you be Google, you can be Bing with ChatGPT, you can be you know, whoever, InMobi with the next great competitor to Android and iOS. We will treat all of you equally, and we will give you all of the incentives and support that we can give you. I certainly as an Indian want more and more Indian entrepreneurship, Indian startup, Indian IP. And for example, in semiconductors in India AI, we are making it very clear that a lot of what we do is for preferential access to Indian startups. Why Indian startups? Because we want the IP to be in India. So those are not contradictory in any way. But India as the Indian digital economy and the Indian tech ecosystem is a global one. We welcome all global participants here to invest, grow, succeed, as well as we want our Indian startups and Indian companies to succeed as well.
Go ahead, please. Get the mic here, please, for the lady. Just
Minister, this is Shweta Rajpal Kohli from Sequoia Capital. Firstly, as a management committee member of PAFI, just really want to thank you for your time and quality time that you're spending here with us. I'd like to specifically talk about the semiconductor opportunity, because you as the minister have been very passionately leading the government's efforts and the Prime Minister's vision on semiconductor. We understand you have a roadshow tomorrow as well. We as investors are also very excited about this opportunity, and we'll be part of the roadshow to make announcements. We'd like to zone out and talk about the larger deep tech opportunity that India presents, especially in terms of the geopolitical developments that we're seeing. And if we see semiconductors as part of the deep tech stack, whether we look at generative AI or we look at semiconductors, quantum computing, we'd love to understand from you how the government is viewing this as the next big thing, and also especially in terms of collaboration between entrepreneurs, startups, investors, as well as the government.
So, Shweta, I think I said it in my speech, which is that we see the digital economy pie, if you want to use that phrase, having evolved from ITES and this consumer tech phenomenon of the last 3-5 years to now going more deeper into tech, deep tech. If you want to call it deep tech, let's call it deep tech. And I will even take where we are on the consumer tech piece, where much of our success has been because of the scale that the Indian market represents. We are now saying that there is an additional opportunity here, especially with the DPDP bill and the data and AI, which is to even if you're a consumer tech play, you can create intellectual property and IP out of innovation that you can build around the legislations and all of the stuff that we are doing on AI. So that is number one. So even where we are moving to things that are not just, the narrative is not just about scale and the number of consumers you have, but also about the underlying IP that is being created here. That is one. The other 2-3 places are electronics and microelectronics design and manufacture innovation, and then semiconductors, and then there's AI, and there's high performance computing and edge compute and all that. I mean, I won't bore you, you know the stuff. We are very interested in encouraging that, and the government, the Prime Minister has given in the semiconductor mission, for example, 1,200 crores to invest in semicon startups. And a year ago or 2 years ago, there were no semicon startups. There were 1 or 2 in IIT Chennai. But we now have about 23 semiconductor startups that are actually doing devices and that are actually going to tape out at the end of 23. A few of them are going to tape out in 23, a few of them are going to tape out in 24, and are going to actually have silicon designed in India with Indian IP that are going to go into products. Now, for example, Navic, a chip that has been designed by an Indian startup, is the replacement for the GPS using our own constellation of satellites. That is going to increasingly in a few years going to replace the underlying silicon that is now driving Google Maps or Apple Maps. They will be driven by that. So there is opportunities that are, they are more difficult opportunities, but I have encouraged investors to partner with us as we do these road shows, partner so that you have, in a sense, you are witnesses to what is out there. And we want to encourage investors to go and say, look, start investing in these areas as well. The next round of startups that you see out of India are AI startups. You're already seeing electronics, you're already seeing semiconductor. I think by July we'll start the roadshows on the India AI startups. And the India Datasets program will be only, will be built, and the access for that will be only for Indian startups. So the Googles of the world and the Microsofts of the world will have to either invest in an Indian startup who in turn has access to the Indian data sets, or not have access to the Indian data sets at all. So they can make that choice. And I certainly think I know what choice they'll make. So, so I'm very excited, and I think investors need to expand their radar in terms of how they see opportunities in India to beyond consumer tech plays.
Good morning, sir. Hello, sir. I'm Vineet Kashyap from Dharma Life Foundation. We primarily work on rural entrepreneurship. So, given your responsibility with the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship as well, my question is, how do you see the potential of digital skilling in enabling rural entrepreneurship in the country, sir?
On digital skilling?
Yes, sir. Digital skilling, sir.
Yeah, no. So I think it's a big priority area for the government. We have launched, soft launched something called the Skill India Digital. It's an app. It's an app, or it's an application online that will bring together skillers, that is institutions that deliver skills, students who want skill, and employers who want skilled students. So we are creating this very powerful online platform that will extend the reach of the skill delivery network beyond just the college in the district to also the lowest, furthest student who's sitting in a village panchayat or wherever. So the digital skilling is going to be a very, very important part of extending our skill network to the furthest parts of India. And the skills that we are offering there are all future-ready, industry-ready skills. That means we are not doing skills that are figment of my imagination or somebody else's imagination. They're industry-backed skills. So somebody who does that skill has a gateway to a job if he or she does that skill. So industry-ready skills and employable skills.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Piyush Doshi. I represent Foundation for Economic Development, and we are focused on finding opportunities for India to excel in manufacturing, particularly manufacturing exports. So clearly the biggest opportunity is in electronics, where the global trade is 2 trillion. China alone does 800 billion. And India's total merchandise is 400 billion. So it's clearly a huge opportunity. We have spoken to a number of players and done the research. And basically what it comes down to is that where our competing countries, the players are running a 100-meter race. In India, they are running a 100-meter hurdle race. So they lose out, right? And I know government is trying to remove those hurdles through single window and ease of doing business, etc. But the worry is that it might take too long and somebody else might actually eat our lunch. So the question is that, can the government think of something as radical as a gift city, where you have completely redesigned set of policies, governance, start from scratch and create a completely new environment which provides a level playing field with our competing nations, so that we also run a 100-meter race and win?
So if I could just add to that question, I think without question, India will be made by Indian companies. Global companies, multinationals can help, assist, sort of take it to a point, but at the heart, India will be built by Indian corporations. So I think in that sense, the point that is being made is that currently they're small in size, funding an issue, growth is an issue.
No, that's
so
a different question, yours is a different question.
But I'm just saying that, I want to add to that.
No, I can answer both.
Yeah, so I'm adding to that. So how do we address that part? Because India will have to produce several very large companies in that section.
Yeah. No, so first point, I think if you're losing sleep, I can assure you that we are losing more sleep. I mean this seriously, because we see this as well as a very, very short-term window. And everything that we are doing, all of government, Piyush ji, Nirmala ji, headed by the PM, all of what we are all doing is basically making sure that we don't lose this opportunity. The entire body language, our effort, and relentless pursuit of this is aimed at that. So there's no difference in your opinion or our opinion in terms of how this opportunity should be pursued. Look, and I don't necessarily agree that it is 100 meter or 110 meters, actually 110 meter hurdles anymore. I'll tell you why. You see today state governments increasingly competing and laying out the red carpet for every manufacturing potential investment. And the problem used to be, if you look at it 4 years ago or 5, even 3 years ago, that used to be the problem. That we were enacting these policies, but the state governments were not picking up on the opportunity. So we solved that problem by having twice a year meetings with the IT ministers. The last IT ministers meeting, I laid out these are the opportunities in the digital economy. Those opportunities are not going to be in METI. We will enact the policy, but the jobs, the investments, all of the economic activity as a consequence of this is going to be in the state. So you can see now Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, you can see the hubs emerging, UP, Noida, very, very proactive state governments leading the charge, labor law reforms, all of that is happening. So the hunger to pursue this opportunity is not Delhi-centric alone. There is a partnership between the government of India and state governments who understand and see the opportunity, and they're pursuing it. Virat, to your point about EMSs and creating manufacturing capacity in India, I personally think it's a priority for us to create that. Some companies are making the move. The Tatas are certainly making the move in that direction. We need 2-3 more companies like that. We need more Foxcons of India, if you want to use that as a template. And it is certainly our focus. But the key way to achieve that interest levels in Indian corporates is to make this an attractive business. And so therefore, what you're seeing today is increasing interest in Indian corporates, because they're increasingly seeing that there is a very serious bright light at the end of this tunnel, which is billions of dollars of business and billions of dollars of opportunity. That has happened in the last 3 years. And when Mr. Cook of Apple came here, he said that we are so impressed by India's ability to support Apple's ramp up so fast. Now, if that has happened and it's been acknowledged by the largest company in the world, that means we are doing something right. And so I think we will continue to do that, and we will continue to make this a competition between states to attract investments. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that we will get to where we want to go.
Honest to God, that was not a planned question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. It has been a delight to listen to your address and also some of the comments which you are giving on the questions. So I thought I should also come out with something in a sector which is a bit less focused in this particular domain, but very important, the agri sector. Yes. So digitalization in agri sector is something which could be the next revolution when we are talking about the total techization, whatever we call that. But there is a challenge where I come from Yara, which is a Norwegian company. We work with the farmers, so it's a crop nutrition company. Right. Do a lot in digitalization space, but when it comes to the last mile, where the participation in the e-commerce business for companies who have invested in India, I think would be very good if we have some clearer policies, because I think that is where we can have the next revolution for the rural India as well.
No, look, our Prime Minister is very clear. He, with the farm law reform, the bills that he wanted, he certainly wanted that. He wanted to allow farmers to disintermediate their economic models from all those layers that exist today by bringing in technology, by bringing in e-NAM, all of that. Of course, that ran into political, you know how it is. So I personally believe, as we talk about search engines and chat GPT and all of that on the tech space, the real impact that tech can make and should make is in these areas, where 80%, 70% of our employment or self-employment is in this agri space. And the true potential of that has not been possible so far because of all these legacy semi-political issues. There is no farmer on the planet, I don't believe, who doesn't want to say, I want to get rid of all these middlemen, and if I'm growing tomatoes or I'm growing wheat or I'm growing rice, I want to be able to discover the best price for myself. And I want to be able to have drone-based ways of making sure my crops are sprayed. I want to have it more and more efficient and reduce my costs, improve my efficiency. It's like any other entrepreneur, any other self-employed person would think. They also think the same way. But the issue is that it gets into all this politics. But if you have ideas on policies, and here, the simplest way is a group of you to meet the agriculture minister, or even if you want me to initiate it from the METI because it's got digital in it, we can create for you a forum where we will bring in the agriculture ministry people, we will sit in with you, and we can have this very open discussion about what the policies ought to be or what it could be.
We received some interest from members who wanted to ask questions. Sandeep Berry isn't here. Rohit Singh. Okay, then the last question there, and then we'll wrap. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. My name is Sudhir Doshi, and first of all, as a proud Indian, I feel India is definitely on the right track. I wanted to ask what Shweta asked about the semiconductors, and then Honorable Minister also mentioned about the ease of doing business. We work in a testing, inspection, certification space. We are across the world. And of course, in India, 25 years now, working with MSMEs. I'll talk specifically about MSMEs when we're talking about growing India, not only as a global manufacturer, but also as a local. I think the biggest challenge right now, most of these manufacturers are facing that once they design the products, They need prototype development, they need design development, they also need the end product certification. If we take example of Japan, Taiwan, how they have evolved, we need to have this robust testing quality ecosystem in this country. And I think there's a lot to do from the private sector as well. Therefore, we'd humbly request if that ecosystem is also evolved. I think the private sector is ready to come into that space, do investments. That's one part of it. So would be grateful for that. The second is that we don't want to, while we respect that standardization is very, very important, but we don't want to reinvent the wheel and have double testing, double standards. I, as a manufacturer based in Chennai, is wanting to export to US, to Saudi, or to EU, and then I have to also cater to the local market. I have to do double testing. As a testing inspection organization, it's a revenue for me, but I think that needs to be solved. It's a big puzzle which needs to be solved, and we really need Honorable Ministry or guidance on that.
No, so I think the second part of it is an understood problem. We know that there has to be a way of some sort of fungibility between standards. If you pass this standard, it should automatically imply this standard as well, and there's no need for recertification. If you have any ideas on how to make that happen, it's a principle that I accept, but if there is a way that you can suggest that we go about it, I'll be happy to have that conversation. In terms of testing and certification capacity in India in general, it was not a problem before because we were not doing anything in electronics. And now it is a problem, certainly, if you're going to start manufacturing billions and billions of dollars of electronics products. Again, on this, the government is very open to doing a private-public partnership. We certainly don't think government labs are going to be the only stop for certification and testing. If you have any ideas and proposals, certainly give it to us. But again, just understand that we don't want any capture of any institution by those who are supposed to be tested or those who are supposed to be the other side of the certification. As long as that basic principle is met, we are open to any model that includes private sector capacity and capability in that.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. It's time to wrap up this excellent session. May I request my colleague Vinita Sethi, Vice President and Secretary PAFI, to propose a word of thanks.
What an insightful session, what an insightful dialogue this has been, Minister Chandrashekhar. Thank you so much. And you know, what you've done today is actually already given us cues for PAFI Dialogue 2.0 on Digital India 2.0. Because as you see in this room, we have members of public affairs, public policy, the professionals, from over 100 companies who are PAFI members, and each one is so enthused with the blueprint that you mentioned that's going to really give momentum. So thank you to the government, thank you to your ministry for driving this big initiative for all of us. And as we just learned, you know, like agriculture, I'm from health sector, who would have known decades ago that technology would embrace us like this, or that we would be so heavily invested in technology? So sir, two cues that I picked up from what you spoke today is, one is consultative framework. And I think from PAFI, we are totally committed to the second thing that you said, is policy advocacy, which is transparent, which is evidence-based, and which is purely for the reason, for the task of collaborating with you, with the government, in the task of nation building. So I think we'll all be committed to it. And as we go forward, we would love to have more institutional arrangements so that we become a part of these design processes with the government. With this, I would like to extend my deep gratitude to Virat and the Apple team for giving us so much space and you know, the opportunity to interact in this important theme and in PAFI activities. To Genesis, DCW for the media coordination today, and to all of you for being a part of such an important dialogue. And before I end, we'll have lunch served here in this room, so kindly join us for the buffet. Sorry, in the next room. and at 2 o'clock, we'll have the AGM for members only. So please join us and stay. Thank you.
Request members to stand up and give a standing ovation, please.
All the best for your